It's Em, here to do a couple more chapters of Queen of the Damned. I considered waiting and doing one more chapter, but I don't want these videos to get too long. And I have a lot of notes, so if you see me looking down, it's because I am checking my notes. The two chapters that I did were Maharet's story, the first part of her story. We're getting more of it in the next chapter, the one I will do in the next video. And then we get more of Lestat and Akasha. Lestat's chapter is called This Is My Body, This Is My Blood, I think. Yeah. Like the verse in Matthew, if you grew up in a church environment. So that's where we are. We're gonna dive in here. Of course, now my neighbors have just decided to start doing yard work. Hopefully you can't hear it. I can hear it, and I hope it won't distract me too much. All right, so Maharet has everybody gathered at this house in Northern California, I believe, if I'm remembering right. She's going to give the history of the vampires, but first we need her whole backstory, apparently. The backstory of her and her sister and their life some 6,000 years ago. They lived on Mount Carmel, I guess. And the sister, I'm going to call her Maharet because the name seems to have been adapted from the syllabic ancient Egyptian style of naming. I don't know why she would have an Egyptian name when the Egyptians are actually the antagonists in this story. But if you know Minkare, the pharaoh's name, and you take the in out, you get Maharet. I don't listen to audiobooks, so I don't know if maybe the audio version of Queen of the Damned has some other pronunciation for this character, for Maharet's twin. Maybe Makar, I don't know. Makar. If you know, let me know in the comments. For now, it's going to be Maharet. Hopefully it won't irritate you too much if it's wrong. I will change it in future videos if I discover it's wrong. I'll try not to say the name too much, maybe. Okay, so Maharet and her twin sister, they are from a line of generational witches going back for as long as anybody can remember. The history in their culture was all oral, so they didn't believe in writing. In fact, writing was scary to them. So they live on Mount Carmel with their mother, and their village takes care of them, and the twins and their mother are able to communicate with spirits and get them to produce rain when it's needed, or things like that, right? Their culture also has cannibalism in the sense that when a person dies, they eat the flesh of the dead because they find that to be more respectful than burying it, allowing the body to decompose, that kind of thing. They don't, eat the flesh of their enemies. It doesn't even sound like they really had enemies. They didn't fight, have wars, or whatever. They lived very peacefully. They had flocks, they had grain. They would go into Jericho for stuff when they needed it, I think. I'm not going to get too nitpicky here, but I will just mention, having a minor in ancient and classical history, sometimes some of what's being described, I'm squinting out a little bit, timeline-wise. And if they're roughly 6,000 years old, and this is 1988, so let's round to 2000. So 4000 BCE. She talks at one point about the Egyptians, choosing to mummify. They used to be cannibals like them, but they choose to mummify. Mummification in the sense of choosing it as a funeral rite didn't come until much later in Egypt. Things like that. Little things like that. That's just a small thing. I'm also just a little curious because, they come from this long line of witches. And yet they don't have a mention of a father. They talk about how at some point they want their line to, they would, and I'm like, so do you just take a lover at some point, so you can have a child and carry on the, this is not specified. One of the spirits that the twins and their mother deals with, she goes on and on about how most of them were good, but some of them were bad, and spirits were really just kind of like, she makes them sound like they're just big dogs that, are sometimes badly behaved, but they mostly just want to play and they want attention, and they're kind of jealous that people have physical forms because they can't do that or have that. But this one spirit's name is Amel, just like Mael's name, but in a different order of letters. And this one is particularly evil. It's unclear like what specifically makes him evil, except that he shows that he has a little more strength than the average spirit. Apparently they wear out really quickly, really fast, like their energy, like they can make it rain a little bit, but it's hard for them to sustain anything for very long. They can't do much more than like throw things around with wind or whatever that they create, or make a lot of, thunder rumble or whatever. So they can be scary, but they're not really very effective. But Amel can prick you. He can kind of come over you and prick you, cause little droplets of blood to come out of you. He says he likes the taste of blood. In a vampire story, who knew? The witches of this culture are well known. Their story spreads to Egypt, where Onkil and Akasha are the rulers. Again, Akasha is from Uruk. And when Onkil married Akasha, she was horrified by the cannibalistic culture because the Egyptians ate the flesh of their enemies. They also did the thing where they ate the flesh of their loved ones, but additionally, they would eat the flesh of their enemies. And Akasha was like horrified and insisted that they stop that. And that's when the mummification thing started. But in any case, they heard about these witches on Mount Carmel, and they invite them to Egypt because they want to, meet them, talk to them, learn from them. Maharet and Mekare's mother, she gets kind of a bad feeling from the tablet that is sent. Again, with the writing, they were like, oh my God. She just is like, you shouldn't go, because if you go and answer their questions truthfully, they're going to be angry and do terrible things. It's going to end badly. But then, not long after that, their mother gets sick and dies, so they need to prepare to eat her body. And it's the day of them eating. Usually the whole village will participate, but because they are witches, they are the only ones allowed to touch their mom, and they're the only ones who can consume her body. I think Mekare is supposed to eat the brain and eyes. She's the stronger twin. She was the first. So she's technically the older sister, and then Maharet's going to eat the heart, and then slowly they will consume the rest of the body. So, the body's been baking on this kind of slab. A brick oven had been built around it. And then the Egyptian soldiers arrive and wreck everything and throw the body in the dirt, and they murder everybody except Maharet and Mekare. And then they take them back to Egypt as prisoners. Now, Cayman is Onkil's steward, his chief steward, and he's the only one who's even kind of showing the twins some kind of kindness. He comes in at night, makes sure that they get fed and things like that. It's kind of confusing because at one point Maharet describes Cayman as that he fought at the king's side, and then just a few lines later is he was no soldier. And I was just like, well, if he fought at the king's side, he is, I think, by definition, some kind of soldier. He may not be a trained soldier or an official soldier, but he clearly was a soldier. So, sometimes there's this internal contradictions. Maharet says it takes them 10 days to get from Mount Carmel to Egypt. And I'm like, it feels like that would have taken longer walking. I don't know. I didn't, look at look at it on a map or anything, but I just feel like Anne likes 10-day spans. Like, Marius was in the ice for 10 days. Maharet had to travel for 10 days to get to Egypt. I don't know. I just, something in me like kind of pinged at that. Ankhil and Akasha question the twins. They don't like the answers that they get when the twins are like, well, there aren't really gods. These spirits pretend to be gods to get your attention, and it amuses them to do that, but your gods are not real. That upsets them. Akasha's kind of described as this sociopath, where she's got this lack of empathy for anyone. She's very, self-centered and only really interested in her own comfort, and she's seeking answers that will give her comfort, and these answers do not. And Amel shows up and gives her some lost necklaces that she'd been thinking about, and she's kind of freaked out because one of those necklaces was supposed to be buried with her mother, and she's like, how did he get this necklace? And Maharet mentions that it's most likely that the necklace had been taken off of the body before it was entombed. So neither answer is good. Either Amel went into her mother's grave and somehow got this necklace, or somebody had taken it from her mother's body. She doesn't like either answer. Amel gets really upset and does the blood pinprick thing to Akasha, which is the only thing that keeps Akasha from ordering the twins to be executed, because she's actually afraid of what the spirits might do if they execute the twins at this point. So instead of executing the twins, they call them out in front of everybody one day at noon when they're out doing their sun worshipping ritual. And Ankhil has Cayman violate them to prove that they have no real power. Ankhil says he would have done it himself, but out of courtesy to his queen, he won't. Now, this is kind of weird because, first of all, pharaohs usually had multiple wives anyway. I mean, I assume that Akasha is the great royal wife. And again, that far back, maybe that wasn't even established yet, but he would have had more than one wife. Cayman does the deed because Ankhil says he won't do it out of respect for his wife. And Cayman doesn't want to, but he knows that he'll be executed if he doesn't follow the orders, so he does it. And then the twins are allowed to leave. They're sent out of Egypt, and they're, find your way home, and they go live with the Bedouin for a while, and Maharet is pregnant from what had happened, and they get back to their people eventually after, getting help from the Bedouin and everything, and she has a baby named Miriam. And then like a year later, Cayman shows up again. Maharet's like, can't you just leave us alone? Look, you have a daughter, by the way. And Cayman's like, no, you have to come back to Egypt with me. Something is very wrong. After the twins were sent away, Cayman, when he comes back to Mount Carmel, he's like, the spirits kept tormenting us. They wouldn't leave us alone. And now, you need to come fix this. So that's the end of part 1 of Maharet's story. It was very long-winded. I mean, after that, they all go to bed because it's getting light, and Marius is kind of thinking about having Louis drink from him to strengthen Louis, but then he's like, but then Louis might lose some of his humanity, and the thing we all love about Louis is that he's the most human of all of us, and there's a lot of weird stuff like that going on, but they all go to bed. We're going to get the rest of the story, in the next night. And meanwhile, we move on to Lestat and Akasha. Well, Lestat awakens. Akasha's not there. He realizes he's in some kind of villa. He thinks it's about 4 centuries old, I think. So built, in the 1500s? He realizes it's a Greek island. He's like, I knew I was on a Greek island. It's very, luxurious. I thought it was funny because like one of the signs of luxury was a really big stereo system. I was like, oh yeah, I remember when that was a thing. Like now, the smaller the better. Like, you know, it's more impressive if it's sleek and small. I don't know. A group of women come in. They're clearly enchanted maybe in some way. They've been given orders by Akasha. Lestat is aware that Akasha is doing on this island what she's done in other places. She's out there killing the men and telling the women to, you know, giving them orders, telling them to spread the word, whatever. So this group of women comes in. It's women of all ages, shapes, and sizes, apparently. And they're there to give Lestat a bath and get him dressed in clean clothes because he's in his ripped up. He mentions he's still in his vampire costume from the concert, like the black velvet cape and ripped up shirt and stuff. So yeah, he needs a bath and a change of clothes. They undress him and he's talking about how nice it feels, their warm touch on his very cold skin. He's surprised at how much whiter his skin has become, even though he hasn't become smooth yet. Like he still has the lines in his face, but he's definitely whiter than he used to be. We get a reiteration that vampires don't have sex. He's like, you know, the useless part of my person, right? Which from what I gather, they've changed that for the television series because it seems like they definitely do have sex there. Or maybe vampire sex is something else. It's made the drinking thing, which is what Lestat and Akasha have been doing, right? Like, that's how they please one another. So, Lestat lets him bathe him. He picks out from whoever used to live there in this villa, who's, you know, dead now, but the women have pulled stuff out of the closet, and he picks a gray Italian suit and some silver jewelry, and it all fits tolerably well. And he's kind of wondering, he's like, can I detach myself enough from humans to just see them as food? And I kind of thought about, like, I was like a vegetarian, like vegetarians that don't eat meat because of animal rights, for example. The average person who eats meat just kind of has detached themselves from the idea that it used to be an animal. And I was like, well, except for him, like if he used to be human, to eat, you know, humans, like it would be like a cow has decided it's not a cow anymore and therefore it could eat other cows, which would be, I don't know. I had a moment when I read it and I was like, it's kind of a weird analogy, but basically he can't quite do it. He also muses that Akasha has all of the desire for like power and dominance of a human. She has the inhuman means to achieve her goal. She wants to be God, and she kind of can be. He's thinking all these things, and like at one point he's kind of thinking about the watch, and the watch breaks, and he realizes that this is all part of his powers. So he practices, he breaks a mirror, he makes the phone move across a table, and you know, bottles are falling, and he stops them and writes them with his mind. He's like, oh, I imagine a hand doing it, but it wasn't like there was an actual hand. It was just the way I was able to focus on making it happen. And then he practices like astral projection. Actually, he thinks he's going to practice just reaching up and touching the ceiling, like floating up to the ceiling. And then he realizes, oh, wait, my body's still sitting on the bed, but and my hand's going through the ceiling. I'm immaterial. And he decides he does not like that. He's like, I didn't like that. I want to stay in my body and have my body do all the moving. This is what we call foreshadowing for book 4. So Akasha does come back and continues talking about how she's going to rid the world of 90% of the men. We'll keep 10% of the men. And that's going to solve all the violence problems, especially the violence against women, things like that. And Lestat's just like, I just don't think this is right. I mean, I don't think you're wrong that men are kind of aggressive and, but what if women want men? They go back and forth. It's interesting because Akasha's talking about how ridding the world of men is going to rid the world of violence, but she's like this woman bringing violence to the world. Violence in the name of peace, I guess. And Lestat even asks, but what if some of the women just kind of step into the role of becoming men? And Akasha's like, lol. She's like, they may look it, but they'll never be it. And I was like, oh, wow, this is really binary. This is really just masculine, feminine. I'm like, is this transphobic? Also, they're basing like this savage garden that Akasha wants to create. That was an idea that Lestat had, right? She's like, oh, but it's going to be so aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be arranged around aesthetics. And I'm like, so are we only keeping what we consider handsome men, good-looking men? If so, is this a form of eugenics? Like, are we trying to only breed beautiful people? Like, how is this going to work? I don't know. Lestat eventually is just like, he gives up arguing. He does kind of say, well, then why why not just kill me? She's just like, oh, it makes me happy to look at you, or, whatever. He's a trophy consort. But also, he's kind of the epitome of masculinity, I guess. And it's interesting because Lestat even reflects on how he wanted to be this symbol when he wanted to be a rock star. He wanted that attention. He wanted to be seen, and even seen as evil. But now he's like, but I don't really want this level of being seen as evil. I don't know. Eventually, he's worn out. He needs to sleep. He falls asleep. He wakes up. Akasha says that his victims are waiting. The island had 700 people, and so she kept 7 men. But she actually kept 10 because she kept 3 of them for Lestat. And he's going to go, like, performatively drink from them in front of the rest of the island's population, I guess. So they go downstairs. I'm like, so did he sleep in the suit? Because she puts a mantle on him, a cloak of some kind, and he talks about how soft it is and everything. And I'm like, so is this over the suit he was wearing? Like, did he fall asleep in the suit? I don't know. I don't know what's happening anymore. I don't think he does either. He goes downstairs. There's these 3 Italian men. They're angry. They're trying to get away, but they've been bound with like a bunch of belts by the women. The women are like waiting there to watch Lestat basically drink from all of them. And he does. And Lestat again realizes that Akasha is using him to symbolize the violence of men. Like, he is the one who is going to be seen as this violent creature that kills these men. At first is reluctant, but he's also really... It's interesting because he talks about how he's not really thirsty, but he kind of is. He wants to drink blood. He drinks from the first one really quickly. He tries to go more slowly with the second one. The third one, he's finally actually able to enjoy it, I guess. And then he and Akasha just fly away. Fly away out of the palazzo, or the villa, or whatever it is. And that's where we end. The next chapter is Maharet, the second half of her story. I don't know, about 75% of the way through the book now, right? So, what do we take away from this? I don't know. If you have any thoughts, insights, let me know in the comments. I can't even begin to imagine how this will work in the TV series. Are we really going to get an Akasha who's setting up a war of the sexes? I don't know. Maybe they'll change her strategy or her plan or her angle on things for the TV series. It's definitely interesting to read now. This was 1988. Again, I was really struck by the the binariness of men, women, as it says. What about women who, present as men, or, and it'd be like, she's like, oh no, that they're just still just women. It's like, I don't know. Anyway, I'll keep reading. Check back in with you when I have more to say. And until next time, take care.